Welcome to this webinar on gender and the strategic approach to international chemicals management, SAICM Beyond 2020. This is part 6 of our series on gender equality and future chemicals management, and the last session for this year. It's great to see you today here, despite the holidays approaching so quickly. My name is Minu Hemati, and I'm happy to be facilitating this session. Allow me to introduce the organizer, MSP Institute. We're a small charitable association based in Berlin, Germany, dedicated to supporting high-quality dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders, stakeholder participation, and good governance. We've been working on gender and chemicals since 2017 with support from the German Federal Environment Ministry and have been active in the SAICM process since then. Anna Holthaus is coordinating our work on gender and chemicals. Pia Timanda is our intern supporting the project, and I'm a co-founder and associate advising the project. So if we go to the next slide, welcome to our 6th webinar in a series. You see the overview of the series. We invited you to join us once a month for 45 minutes on gender equality and its interconnections to the world of chemicals. These webinars are opportunities to learn from experts, policymakers, and practitioners, and to discuss how we can create a gender-responsive future framework for the sound management of chemicals and waste. You see the topics we discussed since starting the series in July. The recordings of webinars 1, 2, 4, and 5 are available on our website and the YouTube channel, and webinar 3 is available as a slideshow. Today, as I said, is about gender and SAICM Beyond 2020 with Brenda Koekkoek from the SAICM Secretariat and Giulia Carlini from CIEL, who I will introduce properly in a minute. Please note that we're recording this session and we'll also make it available again on our Gender and Chemicals website and the YouTube channel. We will continue this series next year. There's a number of people and topics lined up, but we would also really love to hear from you. So let us know if you're interested in giving a presentation on a gender and chemicals related issue, and we'll talk about that. If we go to the next slide, we see the agenda of today is very brief. We'll begin with a very brief brainstorming that Anna will lead, and then we will hear the presentations by our guest speakers who will share their thoughts on gender in SAICM Beyond 2020. We'll hear the presentations, they're about 8 minutes each, and then open for questions and comments. We will use the chat function, and you can raise your virtual hand. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you click on participants and on chat to open those two functions, and we hope that works. If you do have a technical problem, please use the chat and we'll try and help. If your connection isn't good, you might want to shut down your video, but if you can, keep it on so that we can see each other and be together a little bit as a community in these times of social distancing. Thank you so much. For the brainstorming, I'll hand over to Anna.
Okay, thank you so much, and welcome also from my side. Before we begin with the presentation of our guest speakers, I want to invite you to do a very short brainstorming with me, and therefore please use your chat box and type your answer there so that we can see all ideas directly and can brainstorm together. And my question to you is, when you think about integrating gender in the SAICM Beyond 2020 process, what's the first or most important thing that comes to your mind? So take 1 or 2 minutes, think about it, and then type it directly in the chat box. Thank you. And I will do the same, of course. I see there's one first answer, gender responsive indicators and a gender focal point at the SAICM Secretariat. And of course, money, that's always very important. I want to add a gender action plan. Then we have awareness rising and a strategic plan. To be integrated across almost everything. Yes, gender mainstreaming. gender focal point, gender analysis, gender points for discussion at SAICM processes, gender mainstreaming, turning words into practice. Yes, absolutely.
Is that it, or is there more coming?
Even if there's more coming, I will see it in the chat later, and I will try to create a little word cloud with our ideas and send it to you with the minutes of the meeting tomorrow. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for your inspiring thoughts, and I hand over to Mina again.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Participation of women's organizations is another one. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Maybe we can also see what will come in the presentations and in the discussion, and how we can maybe add that to the cloud, and we'll make that available where we're putting the video. We have more time. Use it to get. Thank you very much, Brenda. Indeed, we have more time because of COVID, and maybe we can turn that into something useful with regard to the issue that we're passionate about as well. So thank you very much for sharing these thoughts to start us off. We're now turning to our distinguished guest speakers. A very warm welcome to Brenda Koekkoek from the SAICM Secretariat. Since 2012, Brenda has worked in a leading role with the Secretariat of SAICM. She's currently focused on providing policy support to the SAICM and the sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020 intersessional process, and overseeing the Secretariat efforts to execute a $9 million multi-stakeholder GEF project on SAICM emerging policy issues, building linkages to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Much of her career has focused on policy advice, building strategic partnerships, as well as overseeing stakeholder consultation processes. Brenda is an advocate for gender issues, and we're very much looking forward to her presentation. Brenda, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much, Minu, and thanks to the MSP for hosting this event, and also for hosting these types of events regularly. I think it's a really important opportunity for the chemicals and waste community to, let me just, whoops. Maybe I'll just focus on getting this started for a second.
It was visible. Now it was visible. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yes. Perfect. Thanks.
See it? Do you see it?
No, now it's black again, saying end of slideshow. Click to exit. So
sorry. Just a moment. I'll try one more time. Sorry about this.
No problem. No problem.
Share screen. Okay. Now.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
Looks bright and clear. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So I think also in terms of, thank you for giving us the opportunity to reflect here. It's such an important topic, and I think it's a nice opportunity to go into some detail and be practical about what it is you think you might need in the future instrument, and how you might go about doing that and moving forward. And end of year is always a great sort of opportunity to reflect on what's been achieved over the course of the year, and looking ahead to set priorities for next year. So I just wanted to start out by giving a little bit of a first entry point to what is SAICM in terms of, I think many of you, I recognize most of your names on the screen, so I don't want to get into this too far, but I just want to say that SAICM really is a voluntary body, and it promotes chemical safety around the world. As you're aware, our objective runs until 2020, and that was set by the World Summit on Sustainable Development. is also aligned with the current SDG target 12.4, to protect human health and the environment from adverse effects of chemicals. And I think we just want to focus on that, you know, it was established in 2006. There's a chance here to sort of modernize the future text, but keep some of these aspects that have really been noted as a strength of SAICM, so such as connecting and convening the networks, building capacity for the sound management of chemicals at national level, and its ability to address and identify emerging issues. This is a really important topic to the chemicals and waste community. Of course, chemicals do have adverse impacts on gender, vulnerable populations, women. And I just want to note a couple of publications that have come out. So the SAICM Secretariat recently released a report, Gender Review Mapping, with a focus on the emerging policy issues under SAICM and the relevance to the SDGs. This was a report that was written by IPEN, and it's a part of our Jeff project that Manu mentioned, but certainly a key opportunity for us to sort of step back and reflect on the issue of gender and women in terms of how to, looking ahead in terms of how to better move forward together and map opportunities. The Secretariat also released a policy brief on gender issues over the course of the last 18 months as a means to sort of help inform decision makers. That's available on our website. And it was based on a document that we had prepared for the second meeting of the intersessional process in Stockholm as a means for the stakeholders involved in the Beyond 2020 process to reflect on gender issues as well. So there's a wealth of material out there. They're all rather lengthy documents, and I think these types of discussions are quite welcome to sort of hone it into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 key ideas. So we'll welcome that for sure. You will know that the intersessional process has been established, and it's considering how to move forward on SAICM as it is today, and looking at sound management of chemicals and waste in the Beyond 2020 context. It's chaired by Judith Torres from the Ministry of Environment of Uruguay, as well as David Morin from Health Canada. And this process is an ongoing process, but of course has been delayed due to the whole COVID experience, that we thought we'd actually have a decision on moving forward on the future instrument by October this year. And of course, what I said in my comment is we now actually have quite a lot more time to be thinking this through, and some of these details, not that gender is a detail, but to expand on some important concepts that maybe get put on the side because you're focused on the heavy duty policy issues. You know, this is our real opportunity here. So before I jump into where I see the opportunities in the text, I just wanted to ask one question that I thought we could use this chat function for a little bit. And my question is, in looking at the SAICM text of today, so the overarching policy strategy and the global plan of action, I'm wondering if anyone wants to take a guess on how many times gender is noted in the current text that was developed in 2006. So I can't actually see the chat function right now, Anna, so I'm going to count on you to sort of see if anyone dares answer, if they know how many times gender is noted in the original text. There's prizes available to those who actually get it right. So I don't know if anyone dares to guess how often gender is noted in the current SAICM text.
Okay,
No
there
guesses?
was one guess, 5 times, maybe 2 times,
okay,
0 times, very different
okay,
answers. 5.
okay, okay. So I think we have one right answer there, and the answer actually is 0. So the opportunities to actually expand the gender consideration in the current SAICM text are huge, and I think warmly welcomed. What I want to say is, I think there's a number of references to vulnerable populations. There's a number of references to women, and I think those are important steps in getting there. But the whole gender dimension, I think, has really come forward in international development language since SAICM actually was originally developed in 2006. So I think there really is some recognition, and that's why we were asked to write this report for the Stockholm meeting at IP2 in order to sort of help stakeholders think about what they may wish to consider in the future. I think Giulia is going to probably set the tone with some ideas for what the thinking could be. But what I wanted to just raise is, where are the process opportunities for you to think about getting some of the gender text into the intersessional process. And of course, we currently have the virtual working group process that's ongoing, and I'm going to outline that in a slide as we come up. We also have an informal group considering what a high-level declaration for chemicals and waste would be beyond 2020, as well as the proposed strategic objectives and related targets and indicators, which are also a great opportunity to be thinking about where some gender issues might be reflected in the future. So in terms of the virtual working groups, they're all well underway and will be wrapping their work up in January, but there are 4 groups. One specifically on targets, indicators, and milestones, one on governance and mechanisms, and one on issues of concern, and one on financial considerations. And I think you can think about ways gender could be considered in any one of those topics, all the way from impacts to gender considerations in decision making. And I would encourage you to be thinking about that. Often chemicals is an interesting topic for folks to gather around because of the differentiated nature that chemicals have on different aspects of gender. There is also a group looking at the high-level declaration for Beyond 2020, and it's an informal group that's currently set up that actually is considering gender into their new text, and we're very happy and pleased to see that. I haven't marked any of the details of these virtual working groups here on the slide because it's a lot of detail, but there is a dedicated page on our website, and when we go back to the main discussion, I'll mark that page into the chat for you. But I think it's just important to keep in mind that these are the places you could go to if you have specifics in any of these areas and moving forward. The next thing I wanted to just raise quickly is just that there are currently 5 strategic objectives proposed for the Beyond 2020 instrument, and they are being worked through with stakeholders. And I've given a general overview of what I think each objective is kind of related to. So strategic objective A is related to national implementation, B on knowledge sharing and information and generation, C on addressing issues of concern, D on risk prevention, innovation, and sustainable solutions, including circularity aspects, as well as strategic objective E on finance, mobilization, action, and partnerships. And I heard many of those words already in the brainstorm, so that's quite interesting. And what I want to say about that is just that this group, the group that's looking at targets and for the future instrument, is working within the parameters of these 5 strategic objectives. And there's plenty of room to be thinking about gender-related indicators as you move forward with sex disaggregated data, if you wish. But the indicator process will probably continue to go on. There is a proposal that the UK has offered to continue to host discussions linked to the targets on future indicators. That process will be something that stakeholders can keep developing into. And I think there is quite a good argument to ensure gender experts are included in that dialogue. So I would encourage you to be part of that dialogue. So those were just my original thoughts in terms of just getting the conversation started. And I'm happy to contribute in the dialogue as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for these insights and also for asking us that question. I think one person earned that prize of knowing that it was indeed 0. Thank you very much for this overview and the insights, and also the pointing to the opportunities that it seems we really need to take up if we want to move from 0 to a meaningful number of discussing gender in this ICCM5 outcome. So thanks very much. Our second guest speaker today is Giulia Carlini from the Center for International Environmental Law, CIEL. Giulia is an attorney at CIEL's environmental health program based in Geneva, Switzerland, usually. Her work focuses on endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, international chemicals governance, and global policy on plastics. Giulia is also co-facilitator of the Women's Major Group at the UN Environment Assembly, UNEA, so has experience how to work on gender in a UN process over there. Good morning, Giulia, as you're currently in Peru. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And now let's go into my screen sharing. I hope you can hear me well and now see my presentation. Perfect. Thank you very much for organizing this important webinar. And I wanted to cover three main topics in my presentation. The first one, building on Brenda's points on the current SAICM discussions and where we stand briefly with the virtual working groups and with the high-level declaration discussions. Secondly, I wanted to see if maybe there's some existing language we could use or build on, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel totally. And finally, I wanted to end my presentation covering some new ideas for the Beyond 2020 outcome that are maybe not that new, but are already emerging even in this brainstorming. First of all, on the virtual working groups, there have been general suggestions on how to include gender and women in each of the virtual working group. And here I copied part of the suggestion for the informal women and gender group, to which probably many of the participants to this webinar belong to and contributed to. So we sent already this general input for all the virtual working groups, but then several stakeholders sent also specific text suggestions in each of the working groups. And there maybe we can discuss in the Q&A session, in the brainstorming session later. But I had the feeling that in some of the working groups, maybe these suggestions are advancing more, and in others, it's maybe more challenging to bring this aspect in. And so one of our challenges for next year and for the Beyond 2020 will be how we make sure that the suggestions are actually being included in the text of the new instrument. Then looking at the high-level declaration, as Brenda mentioned, there's an informal drafting group discussing the elements that could be included in the high-level declaration. And here I copied part of the summary from the latest discussion that happened in this group in December. And we can see that one of the elements that could probably make it in the high-level declaration is gender, including women. And I'm about to show you a very text-heavy slide, but you don't need to read it all. I just did a little exercise to look at which stakeholders gave inputs that mention gender or women for the high-level declaration. And as you can see, there are several member states and regions that mention especially equal participation of women and men in the new agreement, but also several NGOs, trade unions, and also international organizations. And again, maybe many cover equal participation, but there are also suggestions about seeing women as agents of change and having a role of bringing also solutions. So it's not only about equality, but also about substance. And I highlighted some of the maybe more concrete points that could be maybe go beyond the high-level declaration from WCF, Women Engaged for Common Future, that are coming up also later in the suggestions. And we heard already about, for instance, having gender focal point and gender action plan. And again, this is not something to read. It was just some points that I tried to take out from the submissions. So the submissions are public on the SAICM website. But then I wanted to make sure we don't reinvent the wheel and we look at what's already there. So we have as a good basis SDG number 5, but we also have some existing language that is mainly has, as Brenda noted, is actually more about women than actually gender, but maybe we could build on that in the SAICM existing text. And also wanted to remind ourselves that actually we have human rights reference that we could make sure are brought into the new text. And here I hyperlinked when you have the presentation a report from the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights on states' duty to prevent exposure. So also, how do we make sure that we make the links between, maybe processes that sometimes are felt more in silos and the processes related to human rights, and this because indeed there's so much that we could and should include. And finally, I have a couple of slides with some suggestions for the Beyond 2020, and many of them are actually coming from the report, Women, Chemicals, and the SDGs that was published by the SAICM Secretariat this month. So the first, and we already heard, so I'm happy that, we see we're in line because several people shared it already, could be to develop a gender action plan under the new instrument. And when we'll have the possibility to add new issues of concern, have the proposal to include women and chemicals. So this is more about women, again, not the gender language, but that could be one of the starting points. And then for the existing emerging policy issues and issues of concern, and for the new ones, looking also at the implementation, there could be a multi-stakeholder working group that develops recommendations for actions to be included in the work plans of the EPIs or the issues of concern. And on my last slide, some suggestions that go beyond 2020 and maybe beyond SAICM, but are still related. And the fact that there could be a new report on cost of inaction and also on the benefits of action that looks at women and chemicals. This report, Cost of Inaction, already exists from the UN. It's a few years old and it's extremely useful in policy and campaigns to really, come with data and cost arguments. And so how this maybe could be beneficial to look into also the benefits, looking at chemicals and women. And a couple of points also related to funding. So how we could include women and chemicals in assistance cooperation as a funding priority, or in project funding, and maybe here going beyond women and more on gender, include requirements that are specific to maybe include sex segregated data or training in project funding. And there could be more, but also beyond the brainstorming, how would we make sure that the ideas are brought into the new year and into the new agreement and then into implementation. And here I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giulia, for these insights into what is actually being discussed right now, what has been suggested, and also raising some questions. I note that on your last slide, your New Year's resolutions read 1, 2, 3, but they're not quite filled in yet. So maybe that's a good thing for us to do in the discussion. I'd like to open it for comments and questions, and I note that there is already comments and questions in the chat. You can also indicate you would like to ask a question by raising your virtual hand using when you open the participants list window, then you can access that. Actually, I'd like to pick up the question that Hans Christian from the German Environment Agency has raised here. You say zero is bad enough indeed, and you're wondering how to get it into the text, but also, is that sufficient? So I read this as, what does the text need to look like to get us from text to action? Is that correct, Hans Christian, or you want to elaborate a little?
Yes, thank you. And I think Giulia made already quite some interesting suggestions on her last 2 slides. And just to start this discussion, what could be really more specific action rather than text work, which is, of course, I think important, but by far not sufficient, I would say. Mm. Being not very decisive on myself, I'm curious and exploring. So just to kick off discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans Christian. So if anybody would like to comment, and of course I'm looking particularly at our 2 speakers, but people should feel free to comment as well. Andrea, you have your hand up. I'll give you the floor.
Thanks, Minu, and hello to everyone who's on this call. So I think my question is in line with what Hans Christian was saying in terms of, concrete action in relation to gender. And one of the things that I've been trying to work on is looking at text to go into national legislation, and particularly looking at countries in low and middle income countries. What would gendered text in which type of national legislation look like? And could we give examples to countries to follow it? So for example, if you do have an indicator in or target or an indicator in SAICM or beyond 2020, how could you action that into national legislation? I think that's really challenging for countries. And the other thing I think countries struggle with is really to understand gender. I mean, often people will say, oh, well, we have women on the board, or we have women, who are participating, and that's not good enough. But often then people don't understand in the chemicals realm, what does a gendered chemical process look like? So I think it would be really good to have very concrete examples for countries, particularly in low and middle income countries, but not only. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I would agree, not only in low and middle income countries, the understanding for gender needs to develop, I think, across the board, and we're all on a learning curve. Andrea from WECF, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I just want to, sorry about my camera, it's not very good at the moment. I just want to send it up what Andrea just told us. Reminded also that, for example, like Brazil, we are always trying to fight against all these right-wing politics that gender has to be deleted from everything, from every kind of policies that we already have been fighting for a very long time to include in it. And then I was thinking about how we are going to cope with that when this is very, very strong at the moment for a few countries, and how to bring this issue then more strongly, that people can really understand why this is important, to be caring about it. No? Just remind this point of view.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess it's also about, we need tools and examples and raising awareness and deepening understanding. And on the other hand, in some cases, it's also a political fight and needing pressure. Hans Christian.
Oh, thank you. I was not expecting to get the floor that quickly. One of the little bit more concrete things has also been mentioned by Brenda, and I would like to ask her on that regarding the targets work, which is ongoing. And I think it's more than having just one gender target or something like that. It's rather checking all targets where it's relevant and to incorporate gender issues in a meaningful way. And that's, of course, a tricky thing and a complex work. And as we are, as German Environment Agency, have also a project on indicators work. Yeah, anticipating what comes after the decisions on the targets, I want to ask Brenda directly who would be the person to check with, to connect all this work, for example, with the UK initiative and so on. Thanks. And pleased to see you, Brenda.
Oops. Sure. So should I just jump in terms of the indicators and targets? Nice to see you too, Hans Christian, and nice to see everybody here. So the targets work will wrap up the virtual working group in January, presumably, and you know, there is. I have to go in and analyze the text directly, but I think we're probably looking at gender-related data more sort of at an indicator level, very specifically. And the UK has offered to host follow-up work on indicators in follow-up to the virtual working group. The contact point on the targets and indicators in the Secretariat is really Delphina Kuglievan, and she's the one who's been supporting the work of the virtual working group. So she would be probably your best contact point on that. But I think it would be quite important that those of you who are highly engaged in this topic, that you know, you should have a go-to person that really is your advocate in this future indicators group that the UK sets up, because presumably while decision making, you know, will be done through the ICCM process, I think there are lots of recommendations that are coming forward that will be helpful to advance the gender topic, and I think that would be probably the most detailed space to get some of your thinking into. Mm-hmm. I hope that helps.
Okay. Yeah, you get a thumbs up. It does help. Thanks very much, Brenda. I'm also looking at the chat, and I think it was Ahmad who asked about biocidal products and if they are included. And then there's another question from him: does gender and chemicals cover wildlife exposure as well? I'm looking to the chemicals experts. That's something beyond my knowledge. I'm a psychologist. Can somebody come in on this? Or maybe we will have to look it up. Brenda?
I think that's a pretty detailed question. Thank you, Ahmad. But I don't think at the moment we're in a space where we're looking at sex-segregated data in wildlife specifically. I think there is research going on in that area, but I would think that on our indicators level, I'm not sure that there's been very much discussion on that at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks very much. Looking at the clock a little, and I'm wondering if we can look ahead to 2021 a little, and I'd like to just pose the question to all of you, and also, of course, to Brenda and Giulia. If you know a little bit of the group who's prepared joint submissions on women and gender issues over the past, well, over a year since Bangkok, and we started, and now we're coming together in strategy sessions, we're coming together in these webinars. You've already mentioned a few things that we should have basically on our radar for the coming months, but do you see any other things that you believe we should be doing as a group, as a coalition, if we can call it that, in the process until ICCM 5, to kind of cement the presence of gender in the chemicals management thinking, but also in the implementation as we move forward? So it's really, I'm often wondering, what is it else that we could maybe do as a group, as a coalition, an alliance, that we somewhat are, I'd pose. Any thoughts on that? If participants don't, I'd like to ask Brenda and Giulia. Yeah, Brenda.
Sure. I mean, quickly from my side, I think sometimes when input comes into us as a secretariat, we get a lot of input and an overwhelming amount of input. So I think that a lot of input's important in order to get your thought point across, but I think it's also very important to be very clear about those targeted few places that you want this embedded and enclosed, embedded and really mainstreamed into the future. So I definitely don't think 1 or 2 mentions are enough in the future instrument. I think you need to be ambitious in that regard, but just be very focused about where are the most important places and send that message across in addition to the larger package of information that gets sent. So really sending the practical high-level priorities in the mix so that those don't get lost.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks very much, Brenda. Giulia, any advice or vision from your side, also with your background and working in UNEA with the women's major group?
Thanks. I agree with the point Brenda just made. And so because sometimes the devil is in the details, and you have to be sure that everything there is there until it's finally agreed. Also, a suggestion I think would be that we need to remain there until the very end and make sure it makes to the final test when it's approved, and don't leave the room hoping we will be in a physical room until we're sure that that's there. And on the links with UNEA and the others, I think mainstreaming the mainstreaming, if I could say that in a way. So make sure that, for instance, from civil society organizations, we are linked through the different processes and fora of the UN, and we don't we break the silos and the clusters, so the message is coherent, so it doesn't change when a delegate changes or where there's a person in the room or not, but it's there regardless of who's in the room, because it's a message that it's a high political message that delegation and stakeholders want to include.
Thank you very much. It means, guys, whenever we participate, we have to have our coffee and tea with us. To not have to leave the room because we're tired, but hang in there until it's closed. Very much my experience as well. It can be a test of patience, but hey, we all learned patience this year with COVID-19, and we'll be able to use it. I think I'm going to close the discussion for now. It's 2:45 whatever it is. Here's 2:45 in the afternoon. I'm wondering, Anna, if you wanted to close it with looking ahead to next year.
Yes. One last question in the chat box, which might be interesting, and then.
Oh yeah. Will there be, Ahmad, thank you for this question. Will there be discussions and talks included in the UNEA 5 first part in February about chemicals and pesticides? Brenda, do you know? Giulia, do you know? Giulia, you are engaged in the UNEA process.
I was trying to reply in the chat because you were closing. Yeah, I don't think so, or not so much compared to the second part of UNEA that would be in 2022, because this virtual UNEA, let's say part 1, is mostly for, let's say, procedural issues, so the budget, the medium-term strategy, etc. But there are still discussions on the side. There might be maybe a little included in a sort of political declaration coming out of that UNEA, and there's still the Global Major Group and Stakeholder Forum that is happening. So there's still possibilities, but I don't know if there will be so many spaces like we might be in the, let's say, normal UNEA, not in a pandemic status, but there's a part 2 the following year.
If I might just add that there is Giulia's answered the question perfectly correctly, but there is a report that was prepared for UNEA 5 on the report on health and environmental impacts of pesticides and fertilizers and ways of minimizing them. Now that in an ideal situation, if we had a full UNEA 5, that report would have been discussed in February 2021, but it will, the details of that and any follow-up would be addressed, as Giulia said, at the next UNEA.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for this information, also sharing the links. Anna, over to you or not over to you? I think over to you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I think it was really fruitful and yeah, thank you very much. And if you have further question, please check our website. It's www.gender-chemicals.org and or contact us individually. And our webinar series will continue next year, as we already said, and several topics and speakers are lined up, but we would also love to hear from you. So please email us directly and let us know if you're interested in giving a presentation on a gender and chemicals related issue. Yes, and with that, I wish you happy holidays. Yeah, see you next year in 2021.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. And take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to be in the same room again next year and sometime soon. Until then, we'll see each other on the Zoom, being around the world, and hope you have happy holidays, restful time, and see you. Stay safe. Thanks so much. Thanks to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Giulia. Thanks, Brenda. Bye-bye. Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Salam, Ahmad. Salam. Salam.
Yeah, I think my video is not working now. I don't know why. It's slow. It's a slow connection.
Yeah, we sometimes have the same problem.